So when people think about toxins, they would normally think about things like heavy metals, maybe, because people know about things like lead or mercury or whatever it might be. Or they would think about pesticides. But so many times people do not think about things like food packaging. They don't think about things that like toxins that are in your home.
Welcome to the Dream Architect Life podcast. I'm your host, Brian Sweet, and we have a super special guest today, Marc Isaacson with Village Green. And for any of our listeners that have listened for any length of time, you know we talk about 5 different pillars, and one of our favorite pillars is health and longevity. And Marc is one of those individuals that we are collaborating with to bring some cutting edge information to educate our clients on things that they might not be aware of as it relates to proactive healthcare. We live in the sick care society today, and there are so many amazing things that we maybe not aware of, and we want to be those people that share that. So I'm excited to introduce Marc Isaacson. We met at Genius Network a number of maybe years ago already, and we've had the fortune of getting together and working together. So Marc, I want to start out by just having you tell us a little bit about your story. I think it's fascinating, and how did you get your start, and then maybe more to the point, how did you get into the specialty that you actually use today?
Yeah, 100%. So like anyone, early on, I was searching. I did a number of different things. I ran a beverage company. I was in beverages. I was in consumer products, and ultimately, I always go back and say, I don't really know to what degree this had relevancy to it all. But my dad actually, at 59, he was the direct opposite of me. Didn't take care of himself. Didn't eat right. He was smoking 3 packs a day, 3 packs of cigarettes a day. A big drinker and so forth. So he really got bad emphysema, cardiovascular issues in his 50s. Kind of crazy. I'm older now than he was. So when he passed away at 59. So
Wow.
just like a devastating thing. And back then I was 25. So I was still searching and seeking and doing consumer product oriented business. And ultimately, I would say I got very lucky in that my first business was doing specialty beverages where we were making spring water and juices. So it was kind of healthier oriented. And I started to go to this big show called the Natural Product Show. It's kind of where Whole Foods and all these healthy, organic, retailers, go to this show. And it's food and it's nutrition. So long story short is I just became super interested and passionate about this whole concept. I was always health oriented, but I became super interested in figuring out, hey, I wanted to make a bigger impact in health. And how could I do that? So I ultimately sold my beverage company and did a search. And at that time, I was in this cool organization called EO, Entrepreneurs Organization, with all these founders of businesses.
Wow.
So good network. And I used that network and I found this business in Bethesda, Maryland called Village Green, or the Apothecary at the time, now Village Green Apothecary. And it was very interesting because the company was a pharmacy at its heart originally, a community-run, family-owned pharmacist. And the folks that I bought the business from back in 2002, they were pharmacists and incredibly innovative. And in the 70s, they started to do nutrition and vitamins, minerals, amino acids. And then they started they had what's called compounding. A lot of people may not know what compounding is, but compounding is where you custom make formulas for people. Usually it's in the pharmaceutical realm, but the original founders were doing some of traditional pharmacy and pharmaceutical compounding where you customize a formula. But because they had expertise on their team, they were actually doing nutrients as well, and customizing nutrients. So that was so I acquired the business. I knew nothing, honestly, I didn't know anything about pharmacy, and I knew a little bit about nutrition because I was kind of following my passion. I wasn't looking to ever acquire a pharmacy, but in this case, this was a very unique pharmacy because the majority of what we were doing was nutrient oriented. And that was kind of the beginning stages. And from there, we've just expanded and grown the business and become more focused on nutrients. So we both sell at Village Green Apothecary, we both sell nutrients, like 8,000 different little bottles of nutrients on the Shopify website. My Village Green is the website, myvillagegreen.com. But we also do all this customization of nutrients. And that was the springboard into all the interesting stuff we're doing today. It's very much the personalized front.
And I think one of the things that would be really great to share is the story about your daughter, and maybe how that helped you accelerate some of the things that you're doing today. So if you maybe tell that story, would be really helpful.
Yeah, and this this is a great entry point to give everybody an idea of where this whole area of whatever you want to call it, biohacking, functional medicine, clinical nutrition, naturopathic docs, and so forth, where all of this is going. So I was in our business, and I give or take a little bit, I was in our business, running our business for about 10 years or so, because I'm running the business about 21 years. And my daughter at the time, her name's Tess, she was 8 years old, perfectly healthy, athletic, great in school, socially, all those good things, very fortunately. And out of the blue, one night, she had a grand mal seizure, just totally no family history. Really, I would say one of the most unexpected things and scariest things that's ever happened to me in my life. So my daughter with my wife, this was right after she went to bed. We had a friend, we were at a friend's, and they went to check on her, and someone came screaming that she's, shaking. And there was nothing that we could do except call 911. And, it was just uncontrollable, nothing that we could do to stop the seizure activity. So through this whole thing, it was a traditional thing. We went to the emergency room, thank God her seizure stopped, and she got MRIs and CAT scans. So over a 6-week period of time, we did all the traditional medical stuff. We live right outside of Washington, D.C. So we were Children's Hospital, top docs, and so forth. And she was ultimately diagnosed with epilepsy, childhood benign epilepsy, which basically means she was going to have seizures all the time, which is what happened. And we had to put her on medications. And because I was running our business, the big question I said is why? Why did this happen to her? Is there an underlying root cause? Because that's kind of where we focus. And 80% of the things we understand why, and you can fix the underlying root cause, but there's a lot of things that we still don't know about. And seizures and seizure activity is one of these things that we don't know a lot about at this point. So we had to put her on meds, and we dug in, and she was having seizures. Usually it was interesting, usually just at nighttime, when she was going to sleep. Usually it happened one week during the month, but it was multiple days in a week, just a very crazy kind of cycle of how she had seizures. And then because I was fortunate, so I was one of the individuals in the world, who I knew the who. We always talk about the who. Who are the people out there that can really help you and understand these kinds of things, and who are the resources that you got to reach out to? So I was lucky because I had a tremendous who network, because I was already in this business. And I said, I reached out to people all over the country to help us. Very smart medical doctors, PhD people. Some of these people were super smart, master's degree clinical nutritionists and naturopathic docs and so forth. So over 3 years, this went on, and we just couldn't figure out anything. We did all kinds of labs, and the typical things you would do is you would look at nutrient deficiencies. You would look at foods, and if there's food problems, we tested for all these things. We experimented with all these different things, and nothing really helped until now. This was originally 11 years ago now that this happened. So about 7 or 8 years ago, we were in the right place at the right time, knew the right people. And I call it this time of convergence, where all this gene discovery was going on. More discovery with biochemistry and foods was going on. So this big time of convergence of data and information. And we had some of the smartest docs and practitioners in the country working with us. And one of them came to us one day and said, we know enough about genes now that we should test my daughter Tess to understand her genes, but most specifically detoxification and detoxification pathways. So this is recent information that even today, very few people are looking at as an example. And we tested her, on these detoxification pathways. So here's what we found out. She had compromised, which is very true with a ton of people. They have compromised detoxification pathways. My daughter tested, but the big question is, what's what are the toxins? So when people think about toxins, they would normally think about things like heavy metals, maybe, because people know about things like lead or mercury or whatever it might be. Or they would think about pesticides. But so many times people do not think about things like food packaging. They don't think about things that like toxins that are in your home. They don't think about body care and shampoos and skincare and cosmetics that you're putting on your body. They don't even think about prescription drugs that might contain toxins. And actually, out of all those different buckets, very limited. My daughter's issue really didn't have to do with any of those buckets. People do not think at all about food as toxins. And in my case, in our daughter's case, now we know so much, but my daughter, her biggest issue was really in two buckets. By far, the biggest issue was sulfur. And people do not, you mentioned sulfur and people say, oh yeah, I've heard about it, or it might be in food. They might think of a couple of things that have sulfur, but there's superfoods that have sulfur in them, like eggs, even if they're organic and grass-fed. There's things like cruciferous vegetables, broccoli, cauliflower. There's other superfoods like garlic, which is a huge sulfur containing, these are just naturally occurring, and things like turmeric, turmeric, which is like this super food that people know and use for anti-inflammatory purposes, like all over the world. So my daughter could not break down and process sulfur. And out of those different things I just mentioned, her thing was every single morning, she was eating super clean, like organic grass-fed eggs, but eggs have tons of sulfur in them. And for her bucket, it's kind of like for 8 years, she was okay, but she got to the point where the sulfur just overwhelmed her body and her detoxification ability couldn't handle that. And boom, that was the driver that we ultimately found out of her seizure activity for her. I mean, just because it's her doesn't mean that's like everyone. And the second thing I will tell you is a lot of people may know or may not know about a diet that's called a ketogenic diet. It's been like a very trendy diet, it's like a new modified version of the Atkins diet, which is designed to be very heavy on fats. Because, and there's actually clinical research out there that I think it's in the ballpark of 40% of the people that have seizure activity can really benefit from that type of higher fat diet. So that was one thing that the conventional docs were able to instruct us to do besides take medications. They said, hey, you should try this ketogenic higher fat diet. So when we understood this and at that same time, we were able to work with nutritionists that understood biochemistry and lab testing. We were also able to test and understand, could tests process things like proteins and fats well and other things. So it turns out that she actually had a little bit of a problem with fat. So in her case, as crazy as all this stuff sounds, in her case, when we gave her really great fats that are supposed to be optimal in this ketogenic, and the brain is made of a lot of these fats, you need to feed it fat like fish oil and coconut oil. Her seizure activity increased. Something that's so counterintuitive, but this all gets down to what we can talk more about. But that's kind of my test story. So thank God for 7 or 8 years now, she is seizure free. She's off her meds, and it's all because on a super individualized basis, we can now today not just understand her biochemistry, but everybody's biochemistry. And that's kind of where we're going, and we can talk a little bit more about that as well.
Yeah, I think that's so amazing. And what I find fascinating as I learn more from people like you in the health and longevity field is what seems to happen today is we all treat the symptoms and never get to the root cause of what happens. And so what I love about what you and others are doing is you're asking those questions, why? And doing things to find out the true cause. And, like in your daughter's case, who would have guessed? Most people would have just been on medication forever and ever, and by you, getting your contacts and doing your research, now your daughter is symptom-free.
Hey, Brittany here. In case you hadn't heard, our latest book, Dream Architecture, is available for the taking. Think about it like this. What is your biggest, wildest dream of what retirement could look like? not the dream that your friends have, or your parents maybe had, or your coworkers. Your best dream, the unreasonable one, the one that you might have trouble admitting even to yourself. So that is what the Dream Architecture book is about. Hop on over to dreamarchitecturebook.com so you can start dreaming big today.
One of the things I'd love you to chat a little bit about is, maybe go a little more in depth. You talked about the importance of food, but I think one of the things that's really magical about you and your firm is how you work with brain chemistry and the customization that you do for each person. And so maybe talk about, when somebody comes to you and they've got a problem, what do you do that helps them get from where they're at to
Right.
fixed, if you will.
Yeah, totally.
I think because that's fascinating, because I think that's really what our audience needs to understand is virtually all this stuff is fixable. It's just, you got to talk to the right people.
Yeah. So look, the foundational thing that we always talk about to everybody, and everybody has to understand, and this is where we have all this data to understand it now, is there is a word that we actually trademarked and created called epibiogenetics. So those are 3 sets of data, unique sets of data. So let me just go through them real quick, because those give everyone a great orientation. So epi is epigenetics. So epigenetics is all of really the outside external influencers that really mess up your biochemistry and cause the wrong genes to turn on that you don't want to turn on. So epigenetics, think about that. That's the food you bring in, the nutrients you bring in. It's a ton about the outside toxins that are coming through air, water, food, lotions, potions you're putting on your body, even prescription drugs, and stress levels are external. Exercise levels are external. Are you getting out in nature? Do you have a good community? All those things are like external things you have control over. All that stuff impacts the biochemistry. So that's epigenetics, what we call epigenetic lifestyle data. Bio is biochemistry. So that's where, and let me just say this, epigenetics, when you think about it, there's nobody in the world that has your epigenetics, because nobody's in the same geographical place, drinking the same water, breathing in the same air, consuming the same local foods, or, and eating the same things all the time, and passive smoke and drinking different alcohol beverages. So it's one of a kind of you. Bio is your biochemistry, and you test that through labs and so forth. So it's the same thing with biochemistry. I mean, I think people can understand that really there's 8 billion people in the world. Nobody has your biochemistry. That's it. One of a kind to you. We're all that unique. And genes, and people really understand genes and genetics, DNA, that is totally one of a kind to you, unless you just happen to have a twin. So you've got these 3 buckets of data that all 3 are really one of a kind for you. So that means, number one, when we look at people and how we work with people, is we can do all this assessment data to understand that. That's one bucket. Then we do a series of different labs. I'm not going to get into all the specific, but there's a handful of labs that really help us understand your unique biochemistry, help us understand, can you detox or not? Do you have inflammatory markers? Do you understanding what nutrients you need, what foods you need, customized for you, et cetera. And then the genes, the genetics, like overlay that data as well to figure out, do you have risk in certain genes? And does that mean that there's certain foods that you have to avoid, or certain nutrients that you need to take more of? Or it helps us structure this whole understanding of detoxification. So that's kind of the high level data that we start with to really personalize just for you. And then diving into the brain, a lot of people understand or know at this point that you got to get the gut right. So a huge amount of our work is the gut right, but the home run is to get the gut right and the brain right. They're so interconnected. So we've been for decades, actually several decades, working with thought leading docs and practitioners on a series of, this is brain chemistry I'm talking about. We just call it like our brain chemistry panel, and it's custom, and we utilize that to do precision nutrient therapy. But the brain is like so critical, because today we understand that through these limited 5 biomarkers, we can both optimize your neurotransmitters. So when I say neurotransmitters, I'll give you examples because people know things like serotonin and dopamine and GABA, and things like that, right? So neurotransmitters are critical to the functionality because those neurotransmitters like really just impact so many different things, from sleep to emotionally how we're doing. So with taking this particular test, the data is crazy high that it's well past 90%. It's comfortably past 95% of people that take this brain chemistry test will show chemical imbalances. And those chemical imbalances, relate to all these core neurotransmitters. And number two, they relate to this whole area called methylation. So methylation is simply, just to make it easy, it's a brain chemistry process. However, or what's super important here, it is a powerful brain chemistry process that has incredible influence over your genes, meaning that if you are high in methylation, they call it overmethylation, or if you're low in your methylation status, it's undermethylation. You want to balance that. So methylation critical because as I said, I was saying, relates to gene expression. So if your methylation is out of balance, you have a much greater likelihood of the wrong genes expressing. That's the whole reason. That's a piece of the puzzle as to why all of a sudden somebody gets sick in their teens or 20s or 30s or 40s or 50s or 60s or 70s and 80s, or some people do not, right? Because they've got all this brain chemistry stuff like sorted out and balanced right. And additionally, methylation has to do with this whole detoxification piece of the puzzle, which is another just critical area that people do not understand yet about how important the ability is to detoxing it all, the junk, really, the things that your body does not want, does not need, and that are harmful to your body out of your system. And then there's, it helps with inflammatory stuff, helps with optimizing the immune system. So there's a whole host of things. And we can now, through looking and getting this testing done, which is less than $500, like all in, to do the testing, to get it reviewed, to figure out what nutrients you need, and then actually have consultative support, beyond the testing. But the critical thing is with the brain, you've got to test. You can't guess. You want to get it right, you got to test because the brain needs precision. So what we do with the testing is we then create what we call a precision nutrient approach, precision nutrient therapy. And what that means is, and I would say almost nobody outside of like the smartest, like clinical nutrition or functional medicine, folks working on the root cause, like 99.9% of the people do not understand that the brain and the building blocks for the brain. So you were saying earlier, Brian, about the whole key thing is getting to the root cause, and customizing just exactly with what you need. So this is what we can do today. So the building blocks for the brain. So all the people that are getting treated, all this has a ton to do with mental health, ADD, autism, anxiety, depression, bipolar, schizophrenia, OCD, behavioral addictions, which are all the things related to TV and gaming and gambling, internet addictions, social media, food addictions, right? All those things, are related to this same brain chemistry test and balancing the neurotransmitters. So that's kind of power. So I'll finish by saying that when you're looking at these nutrients, there are less than 25 nutrients, vitamins, minerals, amino acids. There's a bucket of those that are the key nutrients that balance the brain. Those are the building blocks. There's no other way to get to the root cause and repair the brain than through these bucket of nutrients. What we do is the testing tells us precisely which ones of those you need. You don't need them all, and what the dosing is. And it is so one of a kind and so precise for an individual. And we do those in unique AM dosing. So the AM dosing could have, it varies. Everyone's one of a kind, so it varies. But they could have 4, 5, 6, or 7, or 8 of these different nutrients in them in different dosing. And then we do a different PM dosing because what you need in the morning to optimize the brain is different than what you need at night. And then we customize a very unique PM formula. The same thing, you might be 4, 5, 6 different things, but some of those nutrients can be different and different dosing for the evening. So that's kind of how we transform the brain.
Yeah, I just find that fascinating. And if you think of all the positive things that can come out of it, you know, and for a very nominal fee of $500, you know, people that have things wrong with them that they can't seem to overcome, you know, they might not be at the root cause. In most cases, they aren't. So we could probably talk for like 8 days on all of the things that this benefits. But I think one of the things that we need to do is, if people wanted to learn more or talk about their specific situation with you, is there a best way to contact you or learn more about what you're doing? Or how would one reach out to you, Marc?
Yeah, 100%. So the simple thing anyone can do is just go to Village, VILLAGE, in the color green, myvillagegreen.com. And even if they just go to our homepage, they can just scan down there, because we give you, they can click on like a free 15-minute consult and just jump in with one of our clinical nutritionists just to get a whole bunch of questions answered. And then there's there's a resource section. You know, if you click on the top line, but I think we gave you a link that you can share with people. But if you click up top, we have a couple different areas where you can click on brain. You can click on different lab testing. So there's a very specific brain chemistry test for precision nutrients, and that's kind of the one that we're talking about. But I think it's positioned so when you go into our lab area, it's the top. It'd be the top test that you would see. All about brain chemistry, all about nutrients and customization for your brain.
Okay, that sounds excellent. So I would highly recommend, if you have anything that, you know, has been frustrating or you're not seeming to get over, check out Marc's website. We will have it in the show notes. But I still have 2 other questions for you, Marc, before we excuse me, before we wrap up. Now, as the name of the podcast implies, it's the Dream Architect Life podcast. So one of the questions I like to ask is, what is one of your biggest, most important dream or aspiration for your future?
Yeah. So look, I mean, I will say, Brian, I'm one of the lucky ones, because I'm super blessed and fortunate to be able to do something that I am passionate about. So it is both my work and my play and my hobby to some degree, which is nice. Right. So, and I think that's important. I mean, it's lovely. I mean, it makes life beautiful if you can figure out, you know, what's the stuff that you love to do and you're good at, and you have a lot of passion and interest in that area. So our business, you know, as I've gone through this process of 20 years, really understanding the healthcare system, I would be surprised if I asked the question to your audience, raise your hand if you would give our healthcare system an 8, 9, or 10 out of 10 being the best healthcare system around. I just love it. And working in the system and the insurance and the docs, it's all working wonderfully for me, right? So I would say, you know, most people, you know, would rate our system a 2 or 3 or 4 or 5. So here's what I say. I say that there is a place absolutely for our healthcare system. You know, I run the integrative pharmacy, and what do? We have pharmacies, we have pharmacists, we fill prescriptions at time. I will also tell you that those our healthcare system today, which most people would understand, is built on seeing your doctor, maybe doing some lab testing, getting a diagnosis, and then generally speaking, only getting a prescription. And I will tell everyone to make it clear that 80 to 90% of those prescription drugs, at least 70% of those, only manage or don't manage. You only get 10 or 15%. You get 10 or 15% of the people, 20% of the people really get helped, right? And get managed. But 60, 70, 80% of the prescription drugs do not help people. And on average, I'm saying this is average, they create more side effects. So the crazy thing is that this system where everyone's getting prescription drugs, where 70 or 80% of them do not give help. And when you're talking about addictions and mental health, the data is really clear on addictions and mental health that only 30% of those prescription drugs help to mitigate or help to reduce the symptom. 70% don't work, but 60% of the people, whether they're taking them or it doesn't work, they get side effects. from that stuff. So what I didn't really mention in the brain chemistry work that we do is the results are this program of getting your precision nutrient therapy, what we would call the compound done. If people stay with that program as a starting point, 4 to 6 months, in that window, 80% of the people will show, in many cases, I'm talking transformational, game-changing, life-changing results, 80%. So that's because why? Like we said earlier, we're getting to the root cause. So that's a long way. That's a long roadmap to say we can do it for everybody now. We can do it for everybody's biochemistry. I mean, the brain, we think you have to do customization. You have to do incredible precision nutrients the way we do them because the brain has all these different neurotransmitters and it's very complex. But the gut and all the other pieces of the body, we know enough that we can do the same thing. We can understand the foods for you. We can understand the customization and the nutrients for you that you can potentially get in bottles, and we can help across the board. And I'm building a system. So the big dream and the process where I'm going down is I'm building the system and the process and the team so we can do this in a pretty darn economical fashion.
Oh.
And I believe what we're doing should be at the front end of primary care because all of this is moving towards where we can help people across the board very early in life understand all these risk factors that they have and work with them on foods, nutrients, detoxification to help them greatly reduce health risk going forward.
Yeah, I find it fascinating. You know, you're in the pharmaceutical industry and you're basically saying most of the pharmaceuticals don't work. But the thing I love about what you're doing, Marc, is you're taking it to the next level and creating ways of individualizing performance so that everybody can have something customized so it helps their specific thing instead of, you know, here's this uniform blood pressure tip pill or here's this. So, you know, for people that, you know, don't seem to be getting results, once again, check out Marc's website. And before I let you go, Marc, and this is fascinating, I could sit here and listen to you for hours because I love learning about this stuff. But, you know, the one question I would ask is there anything I didn't ask you that I should have asked you that would be helpful to our audience?
I would just say that so many people, this is unfortunate the way the healthcare system works today. So many people are bought into this model. 50, 60, 70 plus percent of people are bought in this model and they think there is only one healthcare system. And it is, you know, if you're in the space and you hear about this all the time, it's called the disease state like management system. It's not built on fixing you. And unfortunately, what happens, Brian, is the vast majority of people, whether it's me or some other great functional medicine doc, they come to us almost always as a last resort because the insurance companies and the doctors, I mean, in a lot of cases, people don't know, generally, they don't know what they don't know in this case. So that's like another who. You got to find out you got to find the right who person out there who like understands what the healthcare system is. And in our model, there's the place for this, but oh my goodness, it's so crazy because people come to us, Brian, and then, you know, people are struggling for a year, multiple years, sometimes decades, because they've only gone to the best doctors in the world at the best institutions, and they've never, ever, ever understood that they are one of a kind. And we're lucky, we're in this unbelievably lucky time because we understand it now. And we understand what to do about it. And we understand how to fix people up. And that's why I said earlier, this should be on the front end. So people know how to avoid the risks up front. And we can understand that right away, right today. So that's anyone. It doesn't matter whether you're a kid, you're 3 or 4 or 5 years old, or you are a full-on adult, you know? And that's the crazy stuff. Like this brain chemistry test, I don't talk about a lot, but there's very strong data now that even people with, not that you can fix dementia and Alzheimer's, but if you understand your brain chemistry early on, and you're doing this stuff now, I'm talking proactively, it's a night and day difference to reducing risk factors across the board in a lot of places, including dementia and Alzheimer's as well. Yeah. So that's what I would say is, you know, just super important stuff. You know, don't wait. You know, the opportunity is really there for the first time to figure out what your body needs, because you and everybody on this planet are one of a kind. There's 8 billion people, 8 billion, I do not kid you, 8 billion different blueprints and operating systems for each and every person. And that's kind of what my big mission is and where I'm going with all the work that we're doing.
Well, I appreciate you taking that as your mission, because we need amazing people like you to help cure some of the ills that we have in the healthcare world, and you're really making a great dent. So I can't thank you enough, Marc, for being our guest on the Dream Architect Life podcast, and wish you the best. And I'll put all the show notes in and how to contact you. And if you're having these issues, don't feel embarrassed to talk to Marc. He's a great guy, and man, has he gotten some amazing results for people. And so we want to share great opportunities with our audience. So Marc, thanks again for being here, and we'll look forward to seeing everybody on the next episode of the Dream Architect Life. Thank you.
Hey, thank you, Brian. Great to be with you.
Absolutely. Bye-bye.